Hello and welcome back. In this project video, we will be working on creating an itemized structured list generator using nested for loop to communicate content data in an organized manner. Structured data is a standard format for providing information about content items. For example, when we buy an item at the grocery store, the item may show nutrition facts including calories and percentage daily intake values in a tabular format. Another example is a cash receipt we get after we buy items at the store. In both these examples, there are items listed in rows and each row provides detailed information about the respective items. So like I said earlier, in this video for beginners in Python, we will be working on creating similar itemized structure list generator using nested for loop to communicate content data in an organized manner. Data could be loaded in Python in various data types, for example, a dictionary or a list. This project will use an outer for loop to iterate between items in a list, where items themselves could have multiple values stored in them. So another inner for loop will iterate between the values within each item. The result will be neat display of all the items in rows, and each row contains details of items separated in columns of data. This will very much look like a tabular data output, but the table itself is not important. We are more interested in working with nested for loop to work with data in Python. This won't be a lengthy or too complicated project, but hopefully the tutorial will contain enough details for beginners to get hands-on regarding working with nested for loops. After watching this video, you will realize that the same concept could be implemented in formatting printed receipts, displaying inventories, contact list, calorie counts, list of ingredients, and pretty much any area of our daily life. Let's go briefly through the requirements and constraints. We are supposed to generate an itemized structured list in Python where item will be printed or displayed in rows, and each item will have details shown in columns of data. We can use any data types and any operator for this project. The program should not ask or prompt user for any input. We will use nested loop for loop, but we are not supposed to use if statement and while loop in this project. So let's get started. Let's say we are working with contacts or a list of contacts. So for example, a contact could be simple as a dictionary item like this, where the key value pairs indicate first name, last name, cell phone, and email address of the contact or the item that we are disclosing. And if we are to use a for loop to print values within this contact, so we could do that with a for loop similar to this, say for value in item 1, the values. We'll say item details equals item details plus a string representation of the value. But we need to specify an empty string first to tell what the item detail starts with. So this will be our empty string, and inside the for loop we will be adding the string representation of the values within this dictionary. We keep adding that inside a for loop to this empty string. So at the end of this for loop, when we do print statement, we'll just say we'll print item details, and so as you see here, this gives us an output, John Willis, with the phone number and the email address that was in the dictionary. Now the problem with this is it's not giving us a readable output, so we will add an empty string at the end here to take care of that and rerun this again. So this is a little better, but I still want this formatted in a way that the details are not too close and a little bit far apart. So we do /t maybe a couple of times and see the output again. this is much better. So here we see first name, last name, the cell phone number, and the email address of the contact in one line. But what if we needed to do the similar thing with a bunch of contacts, not just one item, but a list of contacts here? So for that, we could import another contacts or a few more contacts here and create a list of contacts. So let's say I want to import. I'm just copy pasting my contacts here. Get rid of this just to show you what I imported here. So here I'm importing, let's say two more items. So now I have, instead of just one item to work with, I have three items. And what I would like to do is say all my items are a list of these item values, or item 1, item 2, item 3. So basically what I'm doing is I have three different dictionary items, and I'm now making a list containing all these three items. So for us to work with this item details printout, similar to what we had earlier, because we have multiple items now, we also need to wrap this whole for loop inside another for loop. So this would look like a nested for loop. So we have to create another for loop that nests or houses that for loop inside it. And in this case, we need to slightly modify our code and say for item in items. So this would be items. And I'm looking at each item in this items. Now I need to put this inside so that it resets every time for new item value. So basically what I'm doing now is that I'm putting this item details equals a blank string inside my first for loop. And basically what that does is it resets my item detail variable to a blank string each time my loop iterates and come back to the beginning. So for the first item, it starts with an empty string. For the second item, it starts with the same empty string, no matter how much values I keep adding here before I print this out. And I'm getting this warning here because this should also go inside that main for loop. So let's run this. And now I'm getting John Willis, John Willis, John Willis. Well, in this case, I get 3 John Willis because I am not iterating between different items for value in item 1. So I need to change that to this item here in my nested for loop and run this again. And this time I'm looping through each of these items. So when I look at item 1, I'm looking at John Willis. When I look at item 2, I'm looking at Mary Jane, and in item 3, I'm looking at Tyler Davis. So that's how this nested for loop is working. It's basically iterating between these items, which are the dictionary data types. And inside each dictionary data types, the nested for loop is looking at each of the key value pairs to pull out values and add them to this empty string at each iteration. And after each iteration, I'm printing that added string value that I obtained from this statement as the output to the user. We could make the output look more tidier with a few print statements before and after that nested for loop. And what basically that does is prints out additional formatting so that it's easier to visualize to the user. And with this else statement at the end, after the for loop ends, it's just printing out the end of list that is red here. So if the for loop reaches the end of this list or the items in this list, it will just print out the end of list line at the end. Now let's run this, and we see this better output with all items, and there are 3 items in this list. So it lists all the items with details as columns in each of the items. And after the nested loop is finished, it will print out the end of list line at the end. Now, this is a very practical example because right now we have 3 items here. What do you think we would have to modify when we add new contacts to this contact list? Well, in that case, it's easy. We can easily import new contacts. For example, item 4 has Mike Dine, and you can see there's um, all other contacts have first name, last name, cell phone, and email, but this one doesn't have email address. Well, let's see how our code is going to react to this new formatting of dictionary data items. Um, so to properly output the item 4, we need to include that item in our list as items equals item 1 through 4 and run it again. And when we see the output, it correctly gives out Mike Dyke as our 4th contact on the contact list. And of course, it doesn't have any email address because it wasn't populated as one of the field or key value pair in the dictionary item. So as you can see, we have created sort of dynamic contact list here with this nested for loop, which basically is a for loop inside another for loop. And what that in nested for loop does is it reads each item in this list, and here in this case, each item within that list themselves are dictionary data type containing key value pairs. And the inner for loop looks at each of those items or key value pairs and prints out concatenated string of the values within that dictionary items. And as a result, the end product is a neat list of contact items or contact list. Now, the same concept could be implemented in another different realm. It doesn't always have to be contact list. I could simply modify the items or dictionary items with new information. So let's say I got rid of all those, and my items in this new example um, will be inventory list. So instead of contact list, I'm implementing the same code to now create an inventory list. So my items will have name, brand, type, and ID of the items that I'm trying to inventory, the quantity of each item, and the price of each item. I still have 1, 2, 3, and 4 items here, so I don't need to change anything here. And obviously my list generator or the nested for loop will still be the same. And when I try to run this, it works just fine. Instead of printing a contact list, it will just print another list of inventory items with all the items that were populated on the dictionary for within the list. So it outputs nicely with the item description. And if you go into the details here, the brand, the type of item, identification number of each item, the quantity, and the price of each item. We could also do this with a similar example, and that would be a case of receipt. So in this case, let's minimize this and remove all my items from here. What I want to import is list of items that my receipt would contain. So in this case, I have 5 examples here. Items 1 through 5 are all items that I want to be populated on my receipt, just to simulate the receipt or the paper receipt that I would get when I buy items at the grocery store or anywhere in any store. So because I have 5 items, I would need to include that item number 4 on my list here, or the item number 5, 5th item. And obviously, again, the nested for loop will still be the same, so I don't need to make any changes here. As you can see here, when I run this, I'm printing all items in a neatly formatted way with the quantity, the description, and the price of each item that I've paid for on my receipt. So as you can see, the concept shown in this video can be used to produce outputs in Python programs in a structured way. There are numerous areas where the program can be useful. For example, we saw in this video that the concept could be used in formatting printed receipts, like in this case, displaying inventories and in the previous example, and the contact list in the first example. We could easily modify the code demonstrated here to adapt it for calorie counts, list of ingredients, and so on. With this exercise, I hope you got a good experience using for loop, and more particularly a nested for loop. That's all for this video. Please stay tuned, and please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Also add your comments on what you think about this content of this video, and thanks for watching.